Thank you. I can confirm you're live on YouTube.
Thanks. Thank you very much. So, if we want to kick off. Let's look at organised. Right. Thank everyone for attending today's meeting of the Audit Committee. The Democratic Service Officer will now conduct a roll call to check who is present at the meeting. When she calls out your name, could you please switch your microphone on and say aye?
Thank you. Councillor Bearshaw.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Dark. Councillor Devulapalli.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Present.
Councillor Coons.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Present.
Councillor Moore.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Rives.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor De Winton.
Present.
Thank you. We've also got Councillor Morley as the portfolio holder.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor De Wally and Standing Order 34.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, can I remind members that this meeting is being recorded and streamed live via YouTube. By attending the meeting, you are given your permission to be recorded and streamed. Members should ensure that their microphones are turned off until they are invited by the chair to address the committee. When addressing the committee, please speak clearly into the microphone and state your name first for the benefit of those joining the meeting remotely. Do we want to go through the officers in attendance for the meeting? Okay, in attendance, Alexa Baker, monitoring officer online. David Rigler, External Auditor from Ernst & Young, Teresa Sharman, Online Head of Internal Audit, Michelle Drury, Deputy Chief Executive and Section 151 Officer, Debbie S, Senior Corporate Governance Officer, Carl Holland, Assistant Director of Finance and Deputy Section 151 Officer. Okay, first item, we have apologies from Councillor Ring. Thank you. Second item, minutes of the previous meeting. Do we agree on the minutes of the previous meeting?
Agreed.
Thank you. Can I sign this? Thanks. Item 3, do we have any declarations of interest? I guess silence means no. Do we have any urgent business under Standing Order 7? We have none. We have one member present under Standing Order 34, which is Councillor De Wally. Sorry, Michael.
Thank you, Chair.
I have no chair's correspondence. And we're just going to have a slight rescheduling of the order of the agenda because I think we're going to bring item number 11, the shareholder report, to the first step we wish to discuss, as Alex isn't feeling so well. So, Alex, wherever you are.
Alexa
even. Sorry, it's Alex here. I do apologise. May I ask you to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for swapping me around on the agenda. Chair, if I may, I'll just give a very brief overview of the report, and then what I'll do is draw attention to a couple of areas where the Audit Committee members may wish to consider whether they require further assurance over and above what's in the report. So what members have before them this evening is an annual assurance report from the Shareholder Committee. And this is a report that's built into the shareholders' terms of reference, and equally you'll see that it's also built into the Audit Committee's terms of reference, that this is how the shareholder speaks to the Audit Committee and lets you know how it's holding the companies to account in terms of its governance arrangements, its systems of control and risk management. So this is the mechanism whereby you can understand the governance frameworks and the risk management frameworks and the internal controls around the council companies. So the report is commencing on page 81, and I should mention that this has been to the Shareholder Committee and was approved at the end of October. So the report commences with just a brief overview of the purpose and scope, and what I should highlight that this isn't scrutiny of what the companies are doing and their business and the reasons why they're doing that. It's not a direct scrutiny of what they do and how they do it. It's about the framework within which they sit. Is that giving assurance in terms of the governance processes in place, the risk management in place, the financial assurance in place? Is that giving assurance to the Audit Committee? As I appreciate, we do have a few new members and indeed members that may have not been completely plugged into the housing companies. So from page 81, I've just given a brief overview there of what the two housing companies are doing. And then on page 83, it's just a note there for Alive West Norfolk that they are in a stage of being closed down and winding up this year, and the aim is to have that company wound up effectively March, April next year. And that's what we're working to. So I have included Alive West Norfolk in there, but not to the same extent as the two housing companies, which are fully operating. So from page 84, you'll see there's a little diagram there that shows how the system works in terms of the council bodies. So the shareholder committee is sitting in the middle there, and the council companies report into their shareholder. That's where they go. The boards report into the shareholder. The shareholder is receiving that delegation down from cabinet. So it's an executive function and it receives a full delegation down from cabinet. But then the shareholder is required to account to audit committee in terms of the governance aspects of what it's doing. And then it's equally required to be scrutinised by the corporate performance panel in terms of what it's doing and why it's doing it. Those bits I mentioned at the beginning that aren't necessarily falling into audits terms of reference, it's because they're falling into scrutiny's terms of reference. So there's just a bit of a sort of an overview of the governance framework there, referencing the constitution, and then that accountability for the shareholder through the scrutiny function and the audit function. At 3.2.7, and I should also 3.2.4, these are the two appendices to the report, and it's the terms of reference and the forward work programme for shareholder committee. Those are two actually very important documents for the audit committee to understand what the shareholder, particularly the forward work programme, to understand what the shareholder is actually doing and what is coming before their committee, because the nature of their work is very cyclical. It goes round, you know, it needs to see the business plans, it needs to see the business delivery plans, it needs to approve those. It needs to have updates, and it receives 6 monthly updates on the governance frameworks for the companies. It reviews annually the governance documents. I think, Emma, you could probably just confirm the page that the forward work programme is starting from, but that is quite a key document to understanding what is the shareholder committee actually doing and referencing it back to its terms of reference. Well, Michelle's got it there. It's on page 104. Thank you. 3.2.10 just covers the governance document framework, which is crucial to have that in place. And we have had a few audits and position statements over the last few years of just making sure that we have absolutely got everything in place for each company, and we're very much nearly there. It's just the service level agreement on the housing company now that we just need to make sure that that's gets across the line on there. But otherwise, certainly compared to where we were a few years ago, you know, we do have quite a sophisticated shareholder function operating, because before it was all quite merged, and the executive and the board of directors was sort of slightly kind of operating. Yeah, I'm glad you said it, Brian. That is fully separated now. You know, there is absolutely separation between the board of directors and the shareholder, and the shareholder has a full programme of looking at what the boards are doing and how they're doing, and holding them to account against the shareholder agreement. What the report then goes into, because the shareholder has got access to minutes and agendas for the companies, is just a bit of an overview on certainly the two housing companies in terms of what are they actually doing from a governance and risk management perspective to provide that assurance to audit committee. So it's looking at matters like the board and the way that they operate with their declarations of interest and their skills matrix, which is a really key tool to understand what they're missing, what skills are they missing from the board. Have they got a finance gap? So if they've got a finance gap, they need to find someone to come on to fill that finance gap, and how that operates. So we move through risk management and assurance, and I won't go through them all, but they're replicated for each of the two housing companies there, the operational and regulatory compliance, and how we sort of gain assurance that that's being complied with in terms of their policy framework. There's a specific reference to health and safety governance, because that specifically is picked up with recognition of the council's own corporate risks, and the recognition that that follows through onto the companies. 4.7 touches on the business planning and strategic governance, because I think, as probably many of you have heard me say, you know, you don't just set up a council company just because you feel like it. You know, you've got to have a reason. It's got to be fulfilling a purpose, and you've got to regularly review that purpose, and it needs to be linked into the corporate strategy, and that within that corporate strategy, it's identified that there's a delivery gap, that in order to deliver the corporate strategy, something needs to step into that space, and the council companies are stepping into a space that needs to be delivered. So that continual review of why we're here, why are we doing this, what's the purpose of these companies, needs to be looked at, and we'll be embarking on that with the company boards very shortly. So 4.8 and 5.8, page 94 and page 99 respectively, are a list of approximately 7 or 8 recommendations where the shareholder is identifying where the continuous improvement needs to come from, and what we're going to be focusing on from a governance point of view over certainly over the next year. Always continuous improvement. There's always room for improvement at all times. And like I said, just at the end there's just a note to Alive West Norfolk. Now, if I was just going to touch on some areas where I feel that Audit Committee might wish to consider whether they do have full assurance from the shareholder, I would direct you to the financial governance cycle, and whether you feel completely assured that you understand how the whole financial process is working, from budget setting by the council companies through to that in-year monitoring, and then the external auditors, the accounts, and how they're all created and brought forward to you before Audit Committee as part of your group accounts. You see that. But in terms of monitoring the finances and the projections, and the market trends, and what the risks might be around the finances for the companies, that might be an area where you feel you just need some more assurance as to how that whole process works. And then just to touch on risk, you'll see from the report that risk is a standing item on the agendas that the companies are looking at, and the West Norfolk Housing Company has actually set up an audit and risk subcommittee, which obviously is doing what it says on the tin. But you might want some more assurance about how the risks that they're identifying in terms of what they're looking at, how that interplays with the council's corporate risk register. So there's just a couple of items there that I wanted to flag to members that you may wish to consider going back to shareholder on. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Alexa. I'd just like to make the point, if we just look at page 84, and just remind ourselves that as Audit Committee, we're not concerned with the operational aspects of the companies. We're concerned more with the governance. So there's nothing. We'd be sort of ultra vires if we started deep diving into the numbers which have been presented to us. So really want to concentrate if we can on the governance. The other thing I'd just mention is that Alive West Norfolk obviously is now, well, it's divested itself of its activities.
Chancellor Jones, I think that's something to say. Is this about what I've allowed? Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention I've got I'm director of Alive West Norfolk, so
Could you please note that, Emma?
And Councillor Long also?
You're just scratching.
Oh, you're just scratching, I'm
You're
sorry.
scratching, sorry.
Sorry, what? Oh, okay. If I just finish what I'm saying, that might be helpful. So with the Live West Norfolk, my one thought is that it ceased to trade as an independent company at a point in time when it's still relevant for the audit of the group. So presumably, although it's no longer trading as an independent company, from the point of view of the audit work will have to be done on its numbers. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes, we're correct for 24-25.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. And the other thing I'd say is that we treat the two companies, or the two property companies, as being sort of Siamese twins almost, but in fact they are very different. And I did sort of listen online to the shareholders meeting in October, which dealt with the housing company, but didn't deal with the property company. So the housing company, I think, is a part of me wonders why we have the housing company actually, but I suppose this isn't the place to discuss that. Anyway, if any members of the committee wish to, after Brian, not scratching, that's okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, the reason, I guess, why we're looking at this tonight is, are we satisfied with the sort of governance framework around this as far as the council's concerned and as far as audit is concerned? And I suppose the question I would pose is, well, what are the other alternatives to what we've had proposed as a way of dealing with it? And obviously the way we've dealt with it is to set up this mechanism that isn't simple to understand. It's quite a complex arrangement, and I think the summary of how the governance works and who's accountable to who helps anyone who's new to it all. And I agree with the comments that were made by Alexa in her introduction. I mean, it's easy to conceive these things and to have the idea as to what they need to do. And I mean, if Councillor Rust was here as the sort of latest portfolio holder for housing, I'm sure she would be pleased with the fact that there are homes that are available to people in West Norfolk that wouldn't have been available if the companies hadn't have existed. But that's about the companies and how they do or don't perform. But in terms of what the alternative is, I mean, I'm not an expert on how companies can be managed within council's portfolios, and so I would have to say, well, I accept that this is a method of achieving what we need to achieve, and if somebody's got a better idea, well, then we'll have a discussion about the way that it could be done better. But at this point in time, the companies are starting to deliver. People are living in homes that they wouldn't have previously had available to them, and we've got a trail of how we can monitor the accountability and the performance of through the process as outlined. And I can't, unless somebody says, oh yeah, but we could do it the same way as such and such a council in wherever else in the country, and they manage their companies in a certain way. The one thing's absolutely certain, the affordables that are within the registered social landlord, some of those nobody within the market locally would have provided that type of accommodation. So that's got to be a bonus. And the private rented housing sector is pretty much broken in West Norfolk. You've got overpriced rubbish being rented by people who, for what they can get away with on it, and we're trying to skew the market to up their game. And I think as long as we can see that demonstrated, then it's ticking the boxes of what it was set up to do, and we've got a methodology for keeping it in check. And that's the important thing, Chair. We've got that methodology for keeping it in check to make sure it does what the corporate objectives of the council say they should be doing. So I'm open all ears if somebody's got a better suggestion.
I mean, my thought is this: that historically, and in other areas, there have been great financial disasters caused by 100% owned companies. And we should also be aware, again, we can't really equate the housing company with the property company because they've got different risk profiles, in my opinion. I said earlier on, I wondered why we have a housing company. The reason I say that is that, as I understand it, it holds properties which have been delivered under Section 106. And had we not had the housing company, my understanding is that those properties would have gone to other social housing providers. But I don't know. I don't know that's within the scope of this audit. Anyway. But I also do take the point that, you know, we perhaps need really to consider how other councils are sort of overseeing the risk of their subsidiaries, because this is a series of proposals, and we might also consider, if we go in our own pack to page 31, where we have the internal audit regarding progress on actions of the West Norfolk property companies. And that seems to be sort of a lot of this documentation to which the report refers to. You know, it hasn't been implemented yet. Is that correct?
That was a few documents that were effectively there. They just hadn't been completed. And I think I've put in the report that the only one that is outstanding, that there is actually some substance still going back and forth between the company and the council, is the SLA. For West Norfolk Housing.
The relationship between the officers doing the
work under
and the basis on which the company pays for that.
Yes,
correct?
Yeah, so the support services agreement, sometimes it's called that, but shorthand is referred to as an SLA. Everything else was there, it just needed putting over the line, which I believe now it is. So it's just that SLA that's outstanding.
I mean, when I listened to the shareholder committee at the end of October, I think Councillor Morley was quite persuasive that the documentation is quite confusing. There's an awful lot of it, and it's not easy to kind of pick up how it all matches together. I mean, we've got a list of all these documents, but I do share his concerns, and I don't know if he'd like to articulate them slightly further. I'm sorry, am I dumping you in it?
Thank you, Chair. I did, and I still do find it a confusing web of detail. And I did think that for all members, knowing that these organisations exist, there should be a kind of a layman's guide really to them, is why we've got the housing company as a registered provider, why we want to do affordable housing, why we're selling at market rates, etc., why we're discounting at 20% or whatever it is for affordable housing. And just to explain it really, rather than, I mean, you can just see what the monitoring office has just been through is a huge amount of documentation. And if you put that on top of our own annual governance statements, you know, you get swamped with, now you and I both personally know that there was a lack of governance on these companies. Well, I don't think we've gone too far the other way, but somewhere in the middle there does need to, I personally believe, and I think one of the board directors agrees with me, that well, we do need that. You know, these are the companies, and this is why we have them. And you know, welcome to our company, sort of thing. Thanks.
We did take that feedback away from shareholder committee, and I think what we're going to look at is in the very short term getting some fact sheets which have been produced about each, certainly the two housing companies, sent around to members, and then getting on the monthly member training schedule. We're going to put the housing companies, because I appreciate, you know, they have been around a while now, and I think a lot of members are a bit sort of removed from that history of the company. So we're going to put that onto the member training schedule to tell the story effectively of what's going on. But then what we're also looking at doing sort of into the medium term a bit is to actually create a corner of the intranet, which will be dedicated to the housing companies, which will explain everything that members have been discussing this evening, as a very quick access go-to to remind members, right, okay, that's what we're doing, that's why we're doing it. And it's you know, it's buried in the business plans, and you know, the kind of the shareholder agreement cycles of how the companies are held to account. And the fact that we provide the services by officers, we do that, but that's recharged, and that whole storytelling of this is why we're doing it, but this is how we do it, we'll create some content for the intranet so that it's all there for members whenever they want to look at it.
Thanks, Alexa. Do we have some?
Is,
I see, but Teresa, can I bring you into the conversation, please?
Yes, I just wanted to say that you're asking about shareholder committee, and is that, you know, how do you know if that's the kind of right model? There's two guides out there, one from the local partnership company, I think it's called, and there's Sit for Guidance, and they both talk about shareholder representatives and a shareholder committee. So you are following, if you like, what is best practice or the guidance that is out there by having a shareholder committee and having that forum to monitor as the shareholder your wholly owned companies. I am quite pleased actually to see a lot of what you've got in place, because, you know, when you set up these companies, they are companies that have to be run like companies, and there's a lot of work that goes into running a company, having directors and doing all the things that you would expect a company to do in terms of, you know, directors appraisals and board appraisals. There's a lot of work in setting up a company. So I'm pleased to see that you're moving towards implementing all of those recommendations, and you are doing what a lot of the others are doing. You actually are quite forward now in compared to some of the others as well. So I think, you know, you're following the guidance, you're following best practice, you're going down the right route. I know it might seem like it's a lot, but you have set up companies, and therefore that comes with it lots of activities that you have to do. So I suppose when you're thinking about setting up a wholly owned company, that is always something to think about. It's not just setting up a company, it's everything that goes with it. So as I say, I'm quite pleased with where you're going, and, you know, quite pleased to see what you've put in place, and that has moved on, and that there is now good governance and oversight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I personally do take comfort from the fact that we are following a sort of a recommended or sit for recommended model, and I wasn't fully aware of that before, so I do take comfort. Councillor Long, sorry, you've been very patient.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chairman. I mean, that's exactly what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
We're doing the right things along the lines of what other authorities do with similar types of companies. And just rewind back to what Councillor Morley said, you know, early on, you know, it was a bit, seat of the pants type operation, because we'd got flats that were being completed that no housing association locally would take on the basis of easy in, easy out, quick tenancies to stop people from ending up in B&Bs. And so we had to react quick. So the need for that particular company came out of necessity, and actually not all of the stock that we were producing as affordables was being considered by local providers, and therefore, you know, we could have ended up with a scenario where there was no local provider wanting to take them on. We now have a company in-house which gives us choice on that. So that ticks an operational box for getting people housed. And of course, the other company was absolutely to deal with the situation, because if you don't qualify for a social house and you can't buy a house, you've got to live somewhere. And so the private rented sector is a difficult market, but one in which, by us getting into it, the idea was that the council's own company would make the rest of the market up its game a bit, because they'll be in competition with brand new homes to a good spec, well insulated, at whatever the local housing market rate is for a private rented house. And ultimately, people will then have a choice which they wouldn't have had. And again, was it required quickly? Yes, it was required quickly, because we were already building those homes. They were already sitting there, you know, and market fluctuations, they were designed that they would come in and take that over. So the history side of things, you know, and the reason why we had possibly a little bit of under governance in terms of the paperwork and ticking the boxes was because we needed to get on and get doing. And it did take an awful lot of time for the governance and all the stuff that's going with it to catch up. but I'm glad to hear that we're doing the right things and we're on the right page. Thank you.
We also, and I've explained that to me, I think that somewhat negative comments were made about the housing company. I would retract. I wasn't aware of the situation when you set those companies up. So thank you. Any other members have any questions? I would just draw everyone's attention to the fact that we're invited to formulate recommendations and feedback to the shareholder in response to the annual assurance report. So we have a slightly proactive role rather than just sort of noting a report. Yes, Tom.
Thank you. Risk. You know, we as the council are the guarantor of this at the end of the day. And obviously it has been the risk and the management of these companies has been delegated to board of directors and obviously nominated shareholders who should be almost doing the precursor for what we do in the way of safeguarding the council's interest in this. And that's actually quite important because, you know, there's not a lot of point if we're going to get involved with this, if it goes wrong, or we end up having a liability. So it's very important also that we take comfort from this. You know, we've already talked about how it's been set up. We've already talked about the systems, which you guys have all spoken of, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, it has to be run by people with a degree of commerciality and nous in the running of companies. The one thing I would say about a property company is it's not complicated as long as you get it set up right and your gearing is right. And by that, I mean your borrowing ratios are correct. And also you don't have too many voids. Voids are very expensive in property. And the whole thing keeps ticking along. And I think this company, particularly, I'm looking at the numbers from the housing company, I think has a good chance of being successful and should be secure. But having said that, we have to have confidence in those who are running it, of course. And therefore we just need to be confident that the council is not going to be put financially at risk. And we were sent the housing company numbers for the year ended 31st of March 2025. And there's one thing which popped up in those, which I might just question whoever can answer it, is it mentions a deed of variation to do with the loans. And obviously that deed of variation made quite a big difference to the numbers. So at such an early stage in these companies' existence, what exactly was that deed of variation? How did it come about?
Thanks, Councillor Whitten. We are slightly straying into the operational side, but I think that's a fair question because that is a governance question. Would Alexa be able to explain what happened?
Yep, so the deed of variation relates to how the interest was being calculated on the loans. So the company has a range of loans, and the interest was being calculated on a regular basis, and it wasn't never intended to be recalculated that frequently. So it was all recalculated, reprofiled, and reconciled back to the payments already made. So it was just a misunderstanding in layman's terms, really, about the intentions of the original agreements.
Was this the setting up of the structure at the beginning, or was this actually, was it the structure of the loan when it was first agreed with the lender? Or was it because it had to be varied for one reason or another?
Okay, I'll just interject if I may. So the issue goes back a number of years So in terms of the original loan agreement that we had with the housing company, there was an arrangement where there was a loan facility that was made available. And that arrangement was that any drawdown in respect of that loan arrangement would be done at a rate that was set out in the loan agreement. What actually happened in practice was that when that drawdown occurred, it was done under a different interest arrangement and not in line with the original agreement. And when it became known that there was that error there had to be a process of recalculating and backdating what the interest rate payment should have been. So that is what you see in the accounts, is the correction of the interest rate payments and the backdating in terms of correcting it. So hopefully that explains that a bit better.
If I might just a bit of clarity on this. So the council borrows the money from the loan board? No. So not the council, the actual housing company borrows the money directly from the loan board, from us. And we borrow the money from the loan board, or is it our reserves?
Yeah, it's actually using our working capital. So we've been fortunate that we've been able to use our cash that we've had in the bank in order to make that facility available. So obviously, if they were to draw down now, we would look to go to the loan board because we don't have sufficient money available to make that loan facility. So it's just in terms of where we are as a council in our cash flow. But the arrangement is that the company can come to us and draw down against that loan arrangement, and they will pay us an interest amount. That original agreement was to pay back that amount at 4.5% above the bank rate. So as you can appreciate, as the bank rate has gone up over previous years, that became unaffordable for the company. So there hasn't been any drawdown against that loan arrangement for a period now, and we're actually in discussions in terms of setting up a new loan arrangement going forward. But this is in relation to the original loan agreement that we had in place with them.
So the council is the lender to the housing company, and we have the security fixed on the assets.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillors, does anyone else have any points they wish, any questions they wish to raise? Okay. And I guess if we want to look at the numbers, the best place to do that would be in CPP, not here, because I'm sure there are questions which might arise from that. Okay, if no one else has any other comments, can we move to our recommendation, please? Which, if I just read that, so we're all very clear about it. To receive the annual assurance report from the shareholder attached as Annex 1. And we thank the shareholder for that. We're invited to formulate any recommendations and feedback to the shareholder in response to the annual assurance report. And I think the feedback we gave is that we do want to see sort of more clarification in the paperwork, really, in the chain of governance. But you're going to address that through training for us, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Thank you. If we're agreed with that. Yeah, agreed. Thank you very much, everyone. Now we have David Rigler from E&Y here, Ernst & Young, who's going to brief us on the current audit, on the progress of the current audit, which was item number 7, is item number 7. So please, David.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, committee. So just a verbal update. What I was going to do is just kind of a quick recap of what I presented back in July, what we've done since July, and then what will come to the next meeting, because we've just started the year-end audit. So back in July, I brought the audit plan to the committee, where we reported the opinion risks and value for money risks, and 7 risks to the opinion and 1 risk to the value for money work. Since that date, the accounts were published mid-July. We've progressed both scope and strategy walkthroughs, and that's an understanding of your key financial systems and the value for money work. We've spent a bit of time with the finance team just agreeing the working paper requirements and providing some additional project management to enable the finance team to kind of prepare working papers first time and done some early sample selection. Now that's all to maximise the completion of planned procedures. So as you recall, the last full audit for Kings Lynn was 1920. Due to the new regulations in the government, we've moved to backstop on a number of years. So there we've got this kind of gap in terms of when the last audit was done and this particular year. For this year, we've then got a limited time and capacity to complete procedures. So it's almost got to work really smoothly for us to get through everything. So we've done what we can working with the finance team to kind of put that in place. In terms of the year-end audit, so it's literally just commenced. Huge number of working paper requests that your finance team have responded to. So there's a lot of work and pressure on them in order to respond. Because what I would say is since that last audit was done, the bar for us has increased again, which means the bar and the request of information to the finance team has also increased. So we've just started. When we report, and I know the committee is being kind of timetable is being looked at to try and put one in around February time. When we report, I'll bring an audit results report, and that report will set out the findings from the work on the 24-25 accounts. What it will do is it will have all of your significant accounts listed out. It will show the level of assurance that we've been able to gain from the 24-25 audit, bearing in mind there's still this historical gap that's going to take a bit of time to clean through. You'll then start to see where you're getting assurance from the in-year work. It will also set out a trajectory. So the National Audit Office issued some guidance which showed a potential trajectory to get back to a clean opinion. And what we'll do is we'll show where the Kings Lynn Council audit is in relation to that trajectory. So you'll kind of then see, okay, at what point will we go back to a clean opinion if everything works to plan? And that will come to the next committee. So I said, we've just started the audit. I've got no significant issues or findings to report to the committee based on the work that we've performed today. But more than happy to take any questions on the audit or the wider context of delivering the audit.
Thanks, David. Members, do we have any? Thank you, Councillor Long.
Just seeking a little bit of clarification. When you sort of talk about these years when audits weren't as audits ought to have been, but are you now running from the end of the time when we signed off what was done in terms of regularising a position that wasn't right, if you like? You're running from that point forward, not from the point when we last had a complete full audit that wasn't messed up by massive delays, COVID and all the other reasons that they didn't get done as they should have got done. So that's really the point I'm raising. Was it from 2019 we're talking about, or are we talking about 24?
It's a good question. It's not a straightforward answer. The way we approach the 24-25 audit is you're right, we're kind of trying to get to a position at March 25 for as many balances as we can that we are then content with. So certain transactions like your cash balance, investments balance, borrowing balance, we can audit that 31st of March position at 25 and get comfortable it's now correct. Certain balances, we will need some of that history. So we will need to eventually go back and rebuild that. So your reserve balances are obviously impacted by what happened in those years. So we're going to have to do some work around I&E and transfers to kind of start to rebuild that assurance. Land and building valuations, another area which will be impacted upon what happened in those years. So there's kind of a bit of both. There's a bit of, okay, we can rebuild assurance in these areas, and then it won't happen for the 24-25 year, but going forward, there will be a bit of, okay, well, what do we need to do to get assurance for those remaining areas to kind of rebuild all of the significant account areas?
Just to come back on that, that's helpful, and I kind of guess that may have been the sort of remit of the answer. But so when you present to us, you will outline that fact that these are data that you know that was right as you know corrected as of April 25, and you've worked forward from there. But this particular figures or data or whatever is a resume of what's happened in the interim 4.5-5 years, wasn't it?
Yep. So the audit results report that I referred to, so you'll have all your significant accounts listed out, so all your balance sheet items, your I&E items. You'll essentially get a green substantive assurance. So for those where we've completely rebuilt assurance at the end of March 25, green. There'll be some that will be partial, where we've got some assurance, but we haven't fully built it. And then there'll be others that will be red, basically no assurance. And that will be things like reserves, because they're so dependent on what's happened in those years. Yeah, with some narrative to explain why they've got the rating they have. So yes.
Thank you, Chair. That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So, David, what's the timetable now? Because I understand we were looking to see the documentation at the beginning of January.
So the audit has just started. The ultimate time or deadline for us is the new backstop date, which is the end of February. Why I wanted a kind of a slight delay, if you like, to the committee, if we can change the committee timetable, is the closer I can get to that end of February, the more complete the picture it is that I can bring to the committee, or else there might need to be some email communication thereafter.
Thanks. So with that in mind, I think we're deferring the January meeting through until February. And I think we've agreed a date for that. It's the 17th of February. Okay, thanks. And for Michelle, do we have the resources to provide all this data?
Well, that is exactly what we need to work out with EY along the way, because as David has explained, there's no way we're going to be able to build back the full assurance on every work stream that he's got to undertake by the backstop date. And one of the things I was going to suggest to David was to explain the RAG rating, so the red, amber, green, in terms of that full assurance to no assurance, because there is an expectation, you know, in terms of when that comes through, where things are given a red rating. It's not necessarily that we haven't done that there's no assurance because we haven't done the work. It might be that there's not been the time capacity to enable to get that full assurance. So I think it's just about you understanding that actually this report is going to be different from what you've seen before. And we recognise that there will be things on there that will be red and amber, and it will take a period of time beyond February 26 to build that assurance back up. And we'll have to align our resources around some of those priorities. And it could be that if there's one area that needs assurance that requires a significant amount of work, that we might not have the resource to be able to do that. And it may be that we agree with David that actually we won't do that for this audit timescale, but we might slip that into next year and get the full assurance next year instead. So it's about us working together with David to understand where those priorities need to be and how we can resource that appropriately.
Thanks. So that's what is the likely opinion, assuming that's maybe not a fair question.
Cool. That's a bet.
I can sit here quite comfortably and say the opinion will be disclaimed. Because of the lack of assurance over all the opening balances, that means we haven't got the in-year assurance. So even in those audits where we've done a previous year, that would have been gaps in history, quite a few of them will still be disclaimed. So, which is why I think looking at that audit results report is probably more valuable to you, because if you just look at the opinion, you're going to see disclaimed, you're going to think, well, what assurance? But if you look at the report, then you go, okay, well, I can see these accounts and I can see how the assurance is started to be rebuilt.
And my final question, how does it fit in with local government reform? Or is that sort of not really a question you want to answer?
I've been asked this at most committees, as you probably kind of expect. I mean, the likelihood is in a lot of scenarios, depending what the final timescales are, that we won't get back to a clean opinion for potentially 3 to 4 years. So you can see how that fits in. In terms of how we rebuild assurance, that will be a factor that will need to be considered, and we're kind of pushing for sector-wide guidance on, okay, do we rebuild assurance on the largest elements first, so that if there is a combination of councils, then it's quicker to get back to a rebuild. But I think the short answer is it complicates the process.
I can assure them. Councillor Long and Councillor Bearshaw.
Yeah, just hearing, you know, where this is going, I think it's really important for us as a committee, because we're the membership today that are here now, but in a year or two's time, there might be different people on the committee. And they'll be seeing these documents, produced with red on them, and they're, oh, what's this? There's red on there. I think as long as the narrative is there to explain why, and to refer back to the minutes of this meeting when that was explained to us, because new people will come along and say, we don't like this. This is all wrong. What's happened? And the answer is, it's going to be, you know, a narrative that's put within so people understand why there are areas where there is not full assurance, etc.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Bishop.
Thank you, Chair. So 2 points if I may. The first one is of the RAG. So simplified RAG, red, amber, green. In this case, we're just painting an extremely bleak picture of reality. Have we considered using a different colour to show what wasn't in scope or what we didn't have time to check? And then future years, it makes it a bit clearer. And the second one is, through previous years, we understand where our high risk areas are. I take it we're prioritising our higher risk areas. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Winter.
Yeah, councillors, having sat on audit committee for probably too long in the past, it's one of the things about having a consistent membership here is that you build up a picture of what goes on, and you do accept that sometimes there are a few weak spots of things. And if you review, having sort of sat here and listened to the audit situation since COVID, where basically the system, I won't say collapsed, but definitely went into sort of terminal stagger for a bit due to what was going on. You have to build a picture. It's almost like a shed full of stock, in that you have stock coming in one end and stock coming out the other end. But COVID, what that did was there was nothing coming in and everything went out, which meant actually we have an empty shed. So what we're doing now, we're actually rebuilding that. We're putting our stock back in. We're filling the holes which need to be dealt with straight away. And I'm not saying the unimportant stuff, but the slightly less critical stuff we are now working on. And I think one has to understand that. And it does take time to build it back up again. And going back to Councillor Long's point, yes, LGR is going to be a problem, but that is down to us. I don't expect a show of hands or any answers, but it depends on us who are actually going to stand again in the LGR regime. Whereas it should obviously be a lot different from what we're doing now. There's not a scenario. And it's important that we have, especially with audit, to have a consistency of knowledge of operating and obviously of our officers and how they operate, so we can actually work together to keep the ship on the road, or ship straight. It's car vehicle on the road. Excuse my analogies, I got muddled up there. But so that's actually quite important. So yeah, you know, as I understand it, yes, we're dealing with the most important stuff, and we will have a complete picture, but it's going to take a few more years.
Agreed. And before I close off, Councillor Morley, do you have any as cabinet member?
I'm definitely not standing for another election at my tender age, but of course I may always be available as an independent member for you to call on. But on a more serious note, maybe I could ask our EY colleague. When I last had a presentation from the NAO, they talked about delinking in their trajectory to get back to normal, about delinking pensions, and also making the audit simpler, because the pool of auditors, perhaps they didn't have a sufficient pool of auditors that were skilled in the art, if it is an art, of local government financing and recording, which, as anybody here will know, is extremely involved and complicated. And I just wondered if you had any information that I haven't got at the moment that might affect this trajectory of getting back to normal by 2008-9. I think. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, you've touched on, there's been independent reviews here, and there's a number of factors that led to the big backstop, and I know we've talked about that as a committee before. One of the key areas is the financial reporting framework that drives your set of accounts. I'm sure you've all picked up the set of accounts. They're not the easiest of documents to understand. CITFA have just completed their latest consultation on their latest CITFA code of practice that drives the financial reporting. They're starting to bring in a few changes, but I think everyone kind of wants some more fundamental changes. So you're right. They've kind of looked at some of the big areas that consume an awful lot of, and it's not just capacity within the audit firms, it's capacity within the finance teams to pull these documents together. So pensions and valuations, two really big areas that spent a lot of time is spent on them. Both are areas where you make all the valuation adjustments and then essentially you strip them out so they don't impact your general fund reserve. It's kind of what's the purpose of them. So there's going to be a lot of work on that. And so the latest consultation is now to introduce indexation for valuations. Still need to value, but you can index in between. But starting to kind of go the right way. Pensions, it's been kind of flagged as an area they're going to look at, but we don't have an answer yet. I know there's been suggestions that just start to account for it as a defined contribution scheme. So actually just account for the fact that you're going to have to make payments going forward rather than have a big valuation exercise. So there isn't an answer for them yet, but they're very much on the table. And I think everyone is pushing for an answer sooner rather than later, just to simplify the set of accounts that has to be produced, but then has to be audited.
Thanks, David. Are there any further questions? Well, then I'll just like to thank you very much for presenting to us. Do you wish to attend for the rest of the meeting? Excellent. Okay, thanks. So the next item is progress report from Teresa. So Teresa, are you available to take us through it?
Yes, I am. Thank you. So this is our first progress report for you for the 25-26 audit. So looking at progress at a glance on page 19, this gives you an overall summary of where we currently are. So we've got 3 audits that we've completed, 1 that's in draft report and quite a few that have been cancelled and 1 deferred, and 47 outstanding recommendations, which is quite good. We really are going in the right direction on those. Let's look at the changes, which is on page 21. So there's a few changes to the audit plan. We've got a couple of audits that have come in. There's 2 at the top in the table. And then we've got 1 that's been deferred, the community infrastructure levy. And then there's 3 there that have been cancelled. If you look at the numbers, you'll be thinking, well, actually, there's another one that's got cancelled, and you'd be right. There's 1 that's not in the table there called housing options, which looks like it will get cancelled. That will be confirmed when we do the final review of the plan in December. So there's a few changes for you to consider and look at. So you've got all the executive summaries in Appendix 2. So the main audit, I suppose, of note for you is the property services audit, which is a limited assurance report. And you've got all quite a good summary of the weaknesses there in that summary, which is on page 34. So it starts going through the summary of weaknesses there for you. And I think it shows there are weaknesses across all of the processes to do with property services and these compliance checks. Happy to take any questions, Chair, I think. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. Members, do we have any questions? Okay. Well, we've noted the report. I did have some thoughts I looked at. Who's that? Do you want to ask? Is he here? No, do you want to ask?
Yeah, thank you, Teresa. Just sort of going through obviously the thing which highlighted last time was the property services situation. How are they making progress in rectifying this? Are they well on it? Is there, have everybody turned up to deal with it who should be there? How's it going?
Probably look at management to answer that one. The report is quite recently issued.
Jason, do you want to comment on that?
Hi, yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to thank my audit colleagues for putting together a very thorough and well drafted report. The issues identified have accumulated over years, and corrective actions did start back in March when the new management team in property came aboard. The audit highlights systemic property management weaknesses, mainly due to a decentralised structure. Long term, we want to correct this by implementing a corporate landlord structure. So there is a centralisation of responsibility for all of these issues, and a process of escalation, etc. Somebody taking responsibility there. We've taken quite a lot of key actions and considering others. We've got a much improved collaboration between my technical team of officers and the corporate health and safety. We now have weekly compliance sessions. We have a dashboard for 9 operational sites implemented, a SharePoint tracker for monitoring compliance. Risk assessment and policy documents are being updated. New activities and qualifications table created. Fire safety program initiated. Door inspections, line drawings all underway. Legionella impact testing processes have been drafted. Asbestos compliance documentation is now largely in place. Caretaker manual and training needs identification underway, and construction design management training review ongoing. We have further outstanding items. We need to have ongoing monitoring and updates to ensure sustained compliance. There are training needs identified, and they need to be aligned with the budget and professional development plans. We are looking to implement a centralised system, which is currently being used very successfully by Alive, who manage their own health and safety. We'd like to see about bolting onto that and using that as one source of the truth. We also have, at the moment, we have firm of consultants Bureau Veritas, who are doing a thorough gap analysis on all these areas that highlighted in the audit report. They're due to report back in second week in December, and we are currently looking to recruit my colleague Tom Putt, who was with us on an interim basis since March, is going elsewhere. That's giving us an opportunity to review the structure of the team, and particularly we've managed to cover lots of former weaknesses in the team and making good progress in those. We're still weak on the compliance side, so we are looking to recruit someone that will probably be entitled head of corporate property compliance and have the right qualifications and training, etc. So quite a number of actions. It's ongoing. We've still got quite a way to go, but we're making steady progress.
Thank you for attending the meeting to brief us. Appreciate that. Anything?
Yeah, just one last thing, Teresa. It appears at the top of our list every time we go through these things. Car park and civil enforcement. Where exactly are we? Is there? Either it's been explained to me or I've forgotten exactly why we still have that on our list.
Again, I'll probably look at manager officers to try and help with that one, because we are trying to put some updates in an appendix on, so you get a bit more information about progress with recommendations. But it's just trying to get the managers to give you the right update. The first updates that came through didn't have the quite information that we needed, that we could put that in an appendix for you, but hopefully next time we do this we will. But I don't know if there's an officer present who is able to give us a bit more update on that one.
Just a supplemental on that, who's actually the cabinet member who actually runs this department?
Are you talking about car parking and civil enforcement?
Yep, we are indeed.
Well, it's just been allocated to Councillor Ring.
Was this the one Councillor Bland was running? Aha, okay. So we look forward to great things from Councillor Ring.
You look forward.
Thank you. I'd just like to look at the audit on climate change. I know we have some members who might be particularly interested in that, and I wonder if they've got any thoughts on the text which accompanies the reports.
Thank you, Chair. Not at this moment.
My thought in looking at this is that on my first reading, we seem to be saying that there's a complete lack of certainty as to any external funding in the future for climate change. And as such, it would appear that our objectives, our strategic objectives are massively compromised. And yet the report itself doesn't seem to kind of highlight that as a sort of a critical area. So have I misunderstood it, or is it something we really need to discuss a little bit? Teresa, what are your thoughts on that, please? Sorry, Teresa?
So sorry, are you saying that you don't think that the audit is commenting on the objectives, or that there's...
Well, the way I read this, it seems to mean that if the funding is no longer available, then it's difficult to see how we're going to achieve our strategic objectives on climate change. That was my take on this.
Yes, and I think that's what we do say, or what we indicate in the report, isn't it? Yes, yes.
Which would imply there's a high degree of risk in our ability to achieve these objectives.
Potentially, yes.
Okay, that's what I understood it to say. So should that be a relatively high risk area in the report?
What did we say? We said it was medium, didn't we? We talked about reviewing the plan and what can be available in the funds, and then going back to members and talking about how you're going to fund the other actions. And we've made it medium, I suppose, because there are some funds available to do some initial actions. So it's not urgent, as in, I suppose, if you said it was high, we'd be saying, right, you've got no funds to do any of this, but there's funds available. But in the longer term, yes, you may not have funds available, so that could need looking at. So I think that's why we've gone with medium, because urgent or high says you need action now, which I don't think you need action right now, but it's something to think about, just what we're indicating there with what we're saying.
Yes, because in your report, we say it had a high risk score of 12 as of September 2024.
Yes.
So are we saying the risk is now reduced?
Well, I think that would be down to officers to look at the risk and decide. They might still think it is high when you see the risk register. I don't know, but that would be an officer evaluation on their view.
Okay, thanks.
I think we should know an awful lot more at the end of next week, come the budget, because I think the rumours are flying all over the place about what's going to happen, and money's going to be taken away from climate change. We don't know what's happening yet, but hopefully that will paint a much clearer picture of what position we're going to be in.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Good.
Thank you, Chair. I never know what's the right thing to say at this committee. It's slightly confusing for me still. So sorry if it's the wrong thing. I just wanted to say that I find it a bit disheartening that we have on the climate change thing, that there's very little attention paid to any mitigation. It's dismissed with one word, and then it's confused with the Hunstanton Coastal Management Plan. So yeah, I just feel that while there's I think a reasonable understanding within the council of reducing emissions and the worry around whether there's funds for it, we don't seem to have quite the same grasp about the fact that we need to mitigate, because 1.5 degrees is already locked in. Variable climate is actually happening as we speak right around the world, and there are some horrendous scenes of towns being flooded and so on, which yeah, I just feel that as a council, perhaps, and maybe I'm wrong, I hope I'm wrong, but I just wonder whether we are adequately prepared. And I'm not entirely sure what the role of this committee is in ensuring that we are looking into that side of things. Is that somewhat clear?
I think we had the cabinet member for climate change with us today.
You want me to speak, Chair? Thank you. Councillor Depapelli is absolutely right. Every fraction of a degree counts. We are indeed pretty much locked into 1.5 degrees warming. It will be.
Could use microphone. Is it?
Yeah, it will be a tough call to keep below 2 degrees warming with the amount of inertia already in the system, whether it's warming that is already locked in, or for that matter, our desire as a civilization to reduce our carbon emissions. We have an informal working group next week, and it's something we can discuss further, and it is the adaptation risks are something that we have identified as requiring more work. And yes, you're right, there is risk in terms of external funding to a greater degree than anything. That is courtesy of central government, and perhaps they should be listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Long, you scratching again.
Yeah, I think, Chairman, I can see where councillors are coming from. And, you know, we look to prioritise the audit of what's happening within a sphere of operation of the council, which the council voted previously as was an emergency situation. I personally didn't agree that it was, but that's what happened. So we go with what was agreed democratically. And then we have an audit that doesn't really follow that urgency. And so I kind of get where you're coming from, and actually, yes, we can do all the things as a council that reduces our CO2 emissions. But even if we had negative CO2 emissions as a council, it wouldn't make a scrap of difference to the world temperature rise that Michael referred to. And so therefore, what we perhaps ought to be doing is auditing at suggestions and developments of what will mitigate the situation and allow for adaptation given the situation. And in doing that, how we don't waste our public money on any more, we'll see what happens day by day as things happen, but we'll have the measures in place as an authority to do the best we can for our local electors without wasting their money on too much strategy and schemes.
Thank you, Councillor Long. We are perhaps straying beyond the brief of the audit committee at this point in time. Councillor.
Yeah, I'd just like to come back on that. I mean, any country can say, well, we're only a small drop in the ocean compared with China and America, but we all have to do our bit. If we all turn around and say, well, we're only a small part of it, then nobody do anything. So we all have to fight climate change as much as we possibly can. Just getting on to mitigation, one of the big worries is, of course, sea level rise, but it's a complicated picture because some of the coastline from Hunstanton down to King's Lynn we are responsible for, and some is EA. And I know there are plans in place from EA, and I believe ourselves as well, to raise flood barriers and raise the sea walls and the banks over the next 20, 30, 40 years. There are plans in place to do that. So it's all been thought of. It's just a matter of getting it done. I mean, a lot of this stuff isn't hugely expensive. To put an extra metre on the top of a mud bank and the wash is, pennies in the whole scheme of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Twally, I'll leave as ever the last word to you if you have something to add.
Yes, I appreciate the sentiment about money into adaptation, but we are an area that is at huge risk from climate change. We've agreed as a council to be a leader, and after all, carbon dioxide is a waste product of human activity, and our job is to increase efficiency to reduce carbon dioxide. And as we do so, we save money for the taxpayer.
Thank you, Councillor Wally. Just before we finish off on the subject, I'd just like to ask Teresa, just the background to the cancellation of 4 of the internal audits, please.
So the ones that have been cancelled, there's several which I'm just finding the page changes. There we go. So the data protection one, that was going to be on awareness of staff awareness of data breaches. But when we came to think about the audit, I think it was clear that there was a lot going on that area, that it wasn't felt that the audit would be of any use because the council were already, you know, raising awareness and doing training. The ones about the housing and the local plan, well, the local plan was being redone again because it had to be redone. So it wasn't thought worth doing that one. And the strategic housing one is linked, and the housing option are all linked to the one that we have been doing on the West Norfolk Housing Company. So because the scopes of what was wanted was linked, it's really kind of addressed by that audit. And also the housing delivery strategy is still being developed. So if something's not in place, it's difficult to audit around something that's not quite there. So I think the housing company audit will pick up on some bits to do with housing. And then the seal one is just being deferred. We'll probably pick that up in Q1 next year, just because they've got some new arrangements in place and it makes sense to let them embed a bit and then come in and audit the new processes, not refer to the old ones. So that's really why we've got a few that have been cancelled or deferred, and then obviously we've got a couple of new ones that have come in, but they're the main reasons behind them.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to bring it to an end now, unless anyone has any other points. So I think we're just requested to receive the progress report. And in so doing, we are fulfilling our terms of reference in monitoring internal audit activity. Can we move on? Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the business continuity annual update from Michelle, please.
Thank you, Chair. So members will hopefully be aware that this is an annual update that comes to the committee, which sets out the position in terms of our arrangements around business continuity. It looks at progress that's been made since the last update, which was the 18th of November 2024, and it also sets out the work that we're undertaking over the coming months. So section 1 of the report gives you some background. It sets out the requirement under the Civil Contingencies Act 2004, and it also sets out the framework under which we operate that. Section 2 provides an overview of the current position since, and what I will say is that as I have come into my role as Deputy Chief Executive, I've now taken on the responsibility for business continuity. So this is why I'm bringing the report to you this year. But since I've taken on this role, we have reviewed the Business Continuity Officer group, and we have recognised that actually we needed to separate that strategic oversight from the operational delivery. So we now have a strategic business continuity corporate officer group, of which I'm the lead officer for that. And we also now have a business continuity corporate operational group, which the Assistant Director for Operations and Commercial leads on. We've also undertaken a review of the business continuity policy and strategy. So that has, both of those have been updated and were signed off in October 25, so they're now both available on the intranet. You can see at section 2.3 the list of the critical activities where we have reviewed those services that are critical to restore in an emergency situation. And those are the areas that we would prioritise in any emergency situation. And then section 2.2, we have undertaken a review of the potential threats. So that review was undertaken in September 25. You can see the list of threat cards. So those include things like loss of staff, loss of ICT, including cyber incident, etc. We do have a new one in there, which is loss of operational sites and buildings. So that's just to make you aware of that new addition to that list of threat cards. And then section 3 of the report shows other areas of progress since the last report. So some of those I've drawn your attention to as part of my overview, but you can see the other activities are set out in 3.1 of the report. So the final area to draw your attention to is section 4, which is the forward work plan. And that just sets out some of the next actions that will be undertaken. So you'll be aware that we're about to undertake the exercise METIS 25, so that will be carried out in December 25. And then we'll also be planning for the METIS 26 exercise as part of that. But the other actions you can see as part of 4.1. And I'll draw that to a close and ask for any questions.
Thanks, Michelle. Do we have any questions? Apart from you. If I start at the end of the table, Councillor Long, please.
Yeah, on that list of 2.2, you know, the list, loss of staff, loss of ICT, including cyber incident, loss of King's Court. I mean, are they sort of stress tested and challenged in terms of different scenarios? So, for instance, if we had a large spell of severe weather that would obviously make it difficult for staff to get to the premises, how they would then, you know, be able to function if we had huge winds that brought down all the cables and we lost power and so on. So is you know, are they stress testing different scenarios for each of those? Because, you know, loss of King's Court could be power, it could be flood, it could be storm or tempest.
Yeah. So yes, obviously the METIS exercises we do undertake do bring in different scenarios to stress test those. What I can't give you the background in terms of when they were last tested in that respect, but I don't know whether Debbie might be able to come in and give some response.
Thank you, Michelle. No, we do use the threat cards as an aid memoir to all METIS exercises that we do. We might be focusing, like last year, it was on cyber security. So the loss of ICT would have been used in that scenario. But going forward into December, we will be stress testing every single threat card that we've now got.
Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. So similar lines, have we tested the preventative and recovery barriers, identified them all, scored them? Don't want to expand. So you just talked about loss of ICT. So loss of power will give you a loss of ICT, wouldn't it? So have we assessed our standby generators? Have we got standby generators? That sort of thing.
Can I also add that all our critical services all have their bronze plans and they're reviewed every year. So they go through different scenarios with loss of utilities, loss of power, loss of ICT. What would they need to be physically able to do their business as usual job? So that's another annual piece of work that we do, as well as operating the out of hours call cards as well. So we've got all that information, and certain members have got grab bags to have all that information to hand should an incident occur.
Thank you. Councillor Winton.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Pleasure.
Yeah, 2.2 is very useful. I think the most important thing there is item number 2, loss of ICT, because simply without ICT we don't function now. It's quite simple. And I know obviously we do have backup servers hidden away in other places, which is great. But the thing which concerns me, having been exhibited what's happened to Jaguar Land Rover, M&S and things, is that is the real enemy. I think from the point of view of weather events, which I think Councillor Long has touched upon, I think they are comparatively minor compared to actually a concerted attack on our systems. You might think, who on earth wants to bother with West Norfolk's computer system? But having said that, we handle a lot of money. Therefore, could be considered a target because we have the net value if we were able to pay up. So I think actually the people we haven't really heard from, although obviously we have heard from their management, is basically ICT itself. And I do know they do work under a cloak of mystique and darkness, and maybe if we were to lift the stone and something was to be exposed to light, that'd be very useful for all of us. So again, I think we would benefit from having a senior ICT person whose name I don't even know sitting beside you and arguing their case and giving us assurance that our risk level is well and truly contained. And if not, why not?
Yes, and as I understand, this was an area that was raised at the last audit committee as well. So in response to that, we have set up a session on the 12th of January where ICT will be coming along to talk to you all. Obviously, it is it's not a formal committee session because in that respect, we wouldn't be wanting to talk around those areas where there might be weaknesses in a public committee, because obviously it opens us up to risk in that respect. So what we are going to do is do a briefing for members in that capacity, and then we can do more formal reporting following that in the normal capacity. And if there are any questions that come up in that nature, we would go into closed session to discuss those. So there is a way forward to give you that assurance.
Thank you. That's great. But I think our next meeting is in February, isn't it?
Yes, but this is a separate briefing that we're holding on the 12th of January for you all.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed.
Is this going to be in person? Okay, well, I think if let's start on Teams, and if we don't get very far, we're going to have to bring it into person. Okay.
You say on Teams, but it won't be on YouTube or anything like that. No. Thank you.
Councillor Morley, sorry.
I think as well as a deputy chief executive, I should, as portfolio holder, say yes, we're rather conscious of what's been happening with cybersecurity. And you're quite right, Councillor Winton. We do have a huge amount of money going through our system, both from our tax collection purposes and our benefit operation. And also we have a lot of information on customers and direct debits, etc. So, I mean, that's quite in the public domain. So by me saying it here isn't going to harm us at all. But the IT units, it's a kind of a seek and they shall find as well, I have to say. You know, that they will come out and say our number one priority now is resilience. And we're getting cyber attacks all the time and we're resilient to them, but our degree of resilience is going up. It has to go up. And it's at the forefront of the transformation program. There's make no doubt about that. And we're investing in new kit to give us even further resilience, as well as the backup systems that you talked about. So I look forward to January when hopefully you'll feel more assured that we are not neglecting a very important part of. And I know both the deputy and the chief executive officer know that cyber security is at top of our risk list and needs to be assuaged as far as we can. But you know, those pesky Ruskies and everywhere else, they're clever.
Thank you, Councillor Morley, for listening to us. Do we have any other comments from the floor? Okay, so we're asked to review the progress made and endorse the approach being taken to our own business continuity arrangements. And the purpose of this is to ensure that members are kept informed about the Council's business continuity arrangements. Are we agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item number 10. Which is the last item here, the risk strategy and policy report from Debbie S, please.
Thank you, Chair. The risk policy and strategy was last reviewed in 2022, with the next scheduled to be reviewed in 2029. The Council's approach has not changed. It's to risk management is covered in the policy at page 59 of the agenda. Our aim is to be proactive and to ensure that strategic and operational risks are identified and assessed by considering the impacts and likelihood of their occurrence. Risks are effectively managed by identifying suitable controls and countermeasures, assessing the mitigating actions proposed, and reviewing progress and emerging issues. The strategy on page 67 explains how the individual risk scores are calculated and provides a breakdown of key roles and responsibilities across the authority. All employees and members are responsible for ensuring there are robust and fit-for-purpose systems of internal control and risk management in place. Since the last version of the strategy and the policy, the improvements to risk management are as follows. We've introduced a high-level summary report for strategic and operational risks, which is monitored by the corporate leadership team on a regular basis. The report assists with identifying, assessing and mitigating risks to minimise the impact on the Council. Allocation of ownership and accountability for each of the risks now falls with the executive leadership team. A launch of a new corporate management system, hopefully due in early 2026, will provide the corporate leadership team and members with the latest risk information. Risk management training will be provided to relevant officers to ensure they have the skills to identify, appraise and control the risk associated with the services they provide and the projects they manage. Audit committee members will also receive risk training to provide assistance when considering the implications of risk with council activities. I'll pause there now, Chair, if there's any questions.
Thanks, Debbie. I would just note that the terms of reference of the Audit Committee state that the purpose of an Audit Committee is to provide independent assurance of the adequacy of the risk management framework, so we should be aware of that. And I'd also note that we do rely on internal audit to provide the Audit Committee with independent assurance as to the robustness of our risk management arrangements. That said, does anyone have any questions they would like to raise, please?
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered, do we actually look at the risk that is inherent in our providers? So people who actually provide services for us, either companies or other councils, do we have an idea of the of how secure they are? Because if they fail, then it will impact on our services. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so yes, so where we have got key contracts in place, we do carry out due diligence around those. Obviously, as members will be aware, we did have an issue with the Innovation Centre a number of years ago, and following the audit of some of the failings that were that emerged following that audit, there was lessons learned, and we built in some actions on the back of that. So there is a process of due diligence that we undertake in that respect.
Just to say, I was, I suppose, a key supplier to the council many years ago now, and it was quite a procedure in those days to fill the paperwork in to give insurance to the council, assurance to the council of that we were okay and robust, and we got stuff in place to make sure we could carry on in the event of emergency in our premises. So yes, and that I'm talking about 10, 12 years ago, and I'm sure that's been brought forward since then.
Thank you. Any other comments from councillors? Okay, that being said, we're asked to consider the report and indicate our support for the Cabinet recommendation. The Cabinet recommendation is to approve the risk management policy and strategy. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Great, thank you. So now I think we're just concerned with the forward work programme, which is as stated. I don't know if anyone has any comments on that and you'd like to see added. Given that we are going to be getting a presentation from ICT prior to the next meeting anyway, so that's important. Okay. And therefore, I guess that's just for me to bring the meeting to an end. To remind everyone, the date of the next meeting has been changed to the 16th of February, 17th of February, right? 17th. So glad we clarified that. Right, thank you all very much. Thanks.